First of all, Debbie, how does an Australian end up in Greece? That's a long way.
I like to call myself a reverse immigrant. I know that's not a term, but that's what I like to call myself because my parents were from here. And I returned here for a holiday and I ended up staying.
I know from your LinkedIn profile it's at least 25 years, so we're talking some time, definitely.
Yeah.
I didn't know you had Greek roots, so that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, both my parents were Greek, so.
Okay. So then you were already a clever hybrid growing up then. I didn't even factor that in. What was that like? You're Australian kid, but you have Greek culture at home.
That was interesting. I wouldn't say that I was a clever hybrid because I wasn't really into the Greek that much, to be honest. My father spoke English quite well. As we grew up, it was more like, we spoke to dad in English. Mum spoke to us in Greek. If I was in trouble, it would definitely be Greek. And I tended to get into trouble quite a bit as a child. So, yeah, two different worlds.
Just from the little that I know about people who are the first gen, it's a bit of a melding of the cultures, and it's fun, but it can also be kind of difficult. But then you decided to do it again, where you're like first gen diaspora, and then you move back. How was that different?
It was a culture shock, beyond culture shock. So I would say, even though I grew up in a Greek household, it was a huge culture shock. Very different.
Okay, yeah, I guess Greeks in Australia is like Greek light, and Greeks in Greece. Another level.
Another level. Exactly. Another level. Yeah. A totally different level. Yeah. Not bad. Different approaches to things, different ways of thinking about things, ways to get around situations maybe, or speaking out and just saying exactly what you think kind of gets you into trouble sometimes.
Especially if you're a girl. I know the feeling.
Yeah. Especially if you're a girl. Yes. Yeah.
With Debbie, how did you avoid what happens with many people that return home or that are expats? They usually just end up with the expats.
I don't know why I would do that. I mean, what's the point of living in a country and just creating your own mini country within the country and ignoring, everything else that's going on around you? I tend to have kept, the same belief system. I don't know, the same character that I had. I don't know whether that's good or bad though, Gaby, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess it could be like a two-edged sword. You keep your character traits, but then you also can understand what's going on around you. So I feel like that's the more modern version of integrating. You don't have to assimilate. You have to be like, this is who I am. This is who you guys are. I can tolerate this. You can tolerate this part. We have to compromise on this.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I totally agree with you. In the past, I would get really upset and try to find, like a solution, try to analyze stuff and stuff like that. I think I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, that's fine. You go your way, I go my way. I understand that, you understand that, we differ. Ciao, kind of thing. Why waste time?
Because you blew my mind that you are Greek. I was not expecting that. So I was going to ask, how in the world did you start teaching then? I guess that's like the natural expat move when you're moving, like I'm going to teach English, but was there something more profound than that?
That was a bit of a shock when I started here, teaching here, because my first job was where I had to use English and Greek. So I had to translate vocabulary and stuff like that. Vocabulary that I really didn't know at all. So I ended up, staying up until godforsaken hours, looking in the dictionary and writing stuff down. And I did that, I think, for about 3 years. And I learned a lot of Greek that way. Those 3 years really helped me develop my vocabulary. I like the fact that you're able to help someone develop their knowledge, not just like in learning the language, but learning about the culture, learning about the literature. And I've learned a lot from students as well. Like they learn from me, but I've learned a lot from students. So it's completely fulfilling.
Yeah, I agree. I think when we think of teacher, we think mostly of someone just telling you stuff. But the way you teach and the way you taught me to teach, Debbie, is more of like a mentor. You're explaining stuff to them and they're like, well, in our culture, we do this. I'm like, ah, okay. It's more of a conversation instead of repeat after me.
I think that may be one of the reasons where, that I didn't go to my Greek lessons.
So now let's ask the master a few questions. You've seen the struggles now for over 20 years. What are the main struggles that you're seeing people getting stuck with? And what's your best tip to get over that?
Students believe that they'll learn very, very quickly. So within a 6-month period, for example, they'll go from intermediate to proficient, which of course doesn't happen anywhere in any language.
What I've noticed, especially now with all this marketing, is like, learn a language in 3 months, learn a language in 6 months. It's like you can go from 0 to being able to say something in 6 months, but you cannot. In 6 months, you can't go from being able to say something to being able to go to college in that language. That's not how that works.
And I would say self-study is also something. With kids, it's easier because they're used to it. Adults, they really need to try to start that over and sit down, study, look over what they've done in their lesson to be able to use it properly. Ask questions. Is there time to speak? Is there time to ask? Is there time to learn? People can be successful and learn a language at whatever age they want.
That is part of the problem with the Industrial Revolution and the idea of retirement too, where after 65, people feel like their learning is no longer relevant or they don't have as much potential as they used to have. But when you look at history from before, you have these sages of wisdom that they're like almost 100 and they're remembering whole texts and scripts and they're teaching people how to do stuff. It's like back then, you're alive, you do stuff. Yeah. So you're alive, you can do it.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. We're alive. We should keep learning. Don't worry about, when am I going to speak perfectly? No one speaks perfectly. No one speaks any language perfectly.
You have to have a very clear goal and also realize, like you said, Debbie, not to be perfect. You have to focus on communicating. Most of what you're doing should be communicating and just kind of smoothing over whatever jagged stuff comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because if you don't speak, the jagged stuff's not going to come out and there's no way that it can be smoothed over. I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. I think society has really done a number on us. No one has to be perfect.
Now, as a wrap up here, Debbie, what is the main misconception that people have about language teachers that they need to wipe out of their brain?
We're teachers, but we don't know everything. If we say, you know what, I'll look that up and I'll get back to you, that's not something negative. That's us showing respect to our students and not just making something up in our heads. Because of everything that's happened globally and teachers have popped up everywhere, they've had a bad experience. Most teachers aren't like that. Most of us really want our students to learn well, to have solid foundations, to be able to build on those foundations.
That's a very excellent closing point. Thank you so much for joining me on this, not really a trip down memory lane, but like a tribute to the first believer I had. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Gaby, it was wonderful talking to you. Thank you for having me.